Hello and welcome back to my channel. As always, my name is Anna and welcome back to another True Crime Tuesday. So for today, I do want to go ahead and discuss a case that happened back in 2013, and to this day, it still sticks with me. To this day, I still think of the victim and I still want to get my hands on the perpetrators. And that case that we are going to be discussing today is going to be the murder of Gabriel Fernandez. So since April is Child Abuse Awareness Month, I did want to come up with that video then. However, I was doing my little series on Munchausen and I didn't really think that it was going to go for as many cases as it did, but May is still a good month because May is actually the anniversary. This week is the anniversary of Gabriel's death. So let's go ahead and get started, and let's go ahead and discuss how this adorable, sweet, innocent little baby became an angel. So Gabriel Fernandez was born on February 20th of 2005, and he was born to his father, Arnold Contreras, and to his egg donor, Pearl Fernandez. And I will address her as an egg donor because that is all this woman really is. He was the youngest of three, having one older brother named Ezekiel and one older sister named Virginia. So Arnold and Pearl's relationship, it wouldn't last long. They would eventually end their relationship. And when this happened, Arnold would say that he always had love for his kids. He was always there for his kids whenever he could. I want to go ahead and give you a little bit of background on Gabriel. So when Gabriel was born, it's not like when he was born, he right away went home with Pearl and Arnold. In fact, when he was born, he spent all of 3 days in the hospital with Pearl and then pretty much would never see her again until he was like 7 or 8 years old. Because when Pearl gave birth to Gabriel, she wanted to get rid of him so quickly. She was like on the phone with family members saying like, come get him. I don't want anything to do with him. She didn't want to bond with her son. To me, that's like red flag number one. But eventually though, he would spend 3 days in the hospital with Pearl, and then Pearl would pretty much abandon him in the hospital as soon as she was discharged. And then that's when custody was actually given to Michael Caranza, and this was Pearl's uncle, so it would make him Gabriel's great uncle. So Michael took in Gabriel and treated him like he was his son. So Michael had a partner, and his partner's name was David Martinez. Now, both of them always did want a child, because they were a gay couple. However, I guess it makes it more difficult for them to have a child. But when they got Gabriel, of course, that was their most happiest moment because they had their family now. So Gabriel was like their little blessing, and he would live 4 wonderful years with them in their home, and they would raise him. In my eyes, these men were Gabriel's parents. Not any disrespect to Arnold because he tried, but they were there for him. They took care of him. They took him in and all of that stuff. So when Gabriel was about 4 years old, though, his grandfather, who was Pearl's dad, didn't want Gabriel living with them anymore because of the fact that he did not want his grandson living with a gay couple. So at his request, Michael would give up custody of Gabriel to Robert and Sandra, his wife. And then Gabriel would go to live with his grandparents. So this is the part of the story that really starts to get me mad. And it's because you have Gabriel, he's 4 years old, he's living his life, he's having fun, he's being raised. Yes, his parents happen to be two gay men, but guess what? He's a fun-filled child who happens to be raised by two gay men, and you don't like him, so you tear him away from that. And he lives with his grandparents, and then later on in life, in like 2012, in October of 2012 to be exact, Gabriel was 7 years old when his egg donor decided that she wanted to come back into his life. And Pearl would start by telling her dad, and I believe finessing her dad, into thinking that she wanted a bond with her son, that she wanted to be there for him and things like that. And eventually her dad, because he wanted that same thing, he wanted that bond between her and Gabriel, decided to let her come around, let her see Gabriel, and eventually he would allow for Pearl to come and to see Gabriel. Now, Robert would later testify, though, that there was a time when Pearl, I guess, had spent the night, and this was at Robert's home, and that Gabriel was allowed to sleep in the same room as Pearl so that they could like bond or whatever the case may be. And that when Robert woke up in the morning, he found Gabriel in the living room sleeping on the couch. And even after this incident where you have your grandson go and try to bond with Pearl, and he ends up sleeping on the couch, even though you know that you put him to bed with her, he still decides to give Pearl custody over Gabriel. Now, when he gave custody of Gabriel to Pearl, there were some family members who did not want that to happen, considering Pearl was never in Gabriel's life. This woman, the last time that she had seen him was when he was 3 days old and she was leaving the hospital. But yet he did. He gave her custody, and Gabriel was off to live with Pearl and his brother and sister and Pearl's boyfriend, Isadio Aguirre. Now, this next part, it is alleged, since there's no actual proof, but I wouldn't put it past her to do this, and it's that the reason that Pearl wanted Gabriel back was so that she could essentially get welfare money, and having Gabriel, I guess, gave her more of it. And that is just the most horrible thing, in my opinion, that you can do. Like, why? But I can't understand. Now, I'm not passing judgment. I know that Robert wanted what was best for Gabriel, but giving him to Pearl, a woman who had never seen him before in his life, I just can't understand why you would allow her to take him, even if that's like her blood or whatever. Like, why would you allow her to take him? This kid knows nothing about her. So Gabriel goes to live with Pearl and Isadio and his brothers and sisters, and during all of this, Arnold, he has his own issues going on, and he wasn't really there for any of this because he was actually incarcerated. And he was behind bars for some crimes here and there. He was just in and out of jail a lot, which I read that was part of the reason why him and Pearl ended up not being together anymore. So after Gabriel moved in with Pearl, that's when things started to change, and Gabriel's beautiful, fun-filled life would actually start to turn into a nightmare, like Nightmare on Elm Street. Because when Gabriel moved in, he would be pretty much ripped from everything that he knew, because he was reunited like with his brothers and sisters, but he also had to start a new school. He was living with these people, these parental figures that he had hardly ever known about. So from October of 2012 until his unfortunate death in May of 2013, Gabriel endured torture and abuse at the hands of Pearl and Isadio. Gabriel would be subject to being beat and hurt, and this was done with fists, with feet, with wooden clubs, with a wooden bat, with a broomstick, with a metal baton, with a belt, with a metal hanger, pepper spray. He was made to eat cat litter and cat feces. He had to take cold showers. He was handcuffed with metal handcuffs, and a data cable was used on him. He had lighter and cigarette burns and marks all over his body. Somehow they made icy hot become a form of torture for this boy, and he was beaten with steel-toed boots, heavy heated spoons. He was even shot with BB pellets from a BB gun. And aside from all of this, he would also be subject to a lot of unkind words at the hands of Isadio and Pearl, basically telling him that he was gay, that he was just a bad kid, and that this was all his fault, and just all of these horrible things that you don't tell a child. And Pearl as well, she would also take him to school, and when she would take him to school, she would like make him wear like girls' clothes, like girls' dresses and stuff, and make him go to school in that. And he had to take a change of clothes with him so that when he got to school, he could just change. And when Pearl found out that this was happening, she, of course, beat him. So his siblings, Ezekiel and Virginia, they were never subject to this torture, to this abuse. In fact, Ezekiel would testify later that Isadio would also abuse Gabriel, and recounted a time when Gabriel was made to get into a bathtub, and Isadio, because he was a security guard, would pepper spray him for like the fun of it. As far as for feeding him, like Ezekiel would also testify that every now and again he would try to like sneak him like food or sneak him like a banana or something to keep him awake. And when Pearl and Isadio would feed him, they would make him eat expired food, outdated food. He would also have to eat food that was like spoiled. On top of this, he was made to eat, like I said, cat feces and cat litter. And when Ezekiel was testifying in court, he did tell of a time when Gabriel was made to eat like some expired spinach, and because it's expired, obviously, like Gabriel's a little boy, his tummy couldn't handle it, so he ended up throwing it up, and this woman made him eat his throw up. And for sleeping arrangements, because, heaven forbid the boy get a bed, he was made to sleep in a cubby box. And it was chained so that it could only be opened from the outside. And to top it off, there was metal handcuffs inside of this cubby box, and they would chain Gabriel's feet to it at night so that he couldn't try to get out. So all of this torture that this little boy was going through, and no one tried to help him. His brothers and sisters knew what was going on, but they were told to not tell. And whenever he would have bad bruises or anything like that, Gabriel and his siblings were made to tell people that they were fighting and that it was a result of them horseplaying. As far as for family, I'm not quite sure if all of the family knew what was going on or if they only knew snippets of it. There was, however, one person who did as much as the law allowed them to try to help Gabriel. And that was Gabriel's school teacher. Jennifer Garcia was Gabriel's first grade teacher. And the two of them, as soon as Gabriel entered his class, they would start to bond and have rapport for each other. And it got to the point where Gabriel felt like he was comfortable enough to tell his teacher what was happening at home. And that happened early into the 2012-2013 school year. And Gabriel started to tell his teacher, and he would tell her that Pearl would make him bleed on his bottom. And it would be by hitting him with the metal part of a belt. And all these other things that he was learning at home. There was a time, I read an article of a time when the teachers, it was drug awareness week, they call it Red Ribbon Week, and it's for drug abstinence or no drug use, things like that. And Gabriel literally told the teacher that he knew how to basically do a line of coke, and he showed her with a little straw, and he showed her how to do it like this, he was doing a line. And it grew concerning for the teacher. So as soon as she was being told all of this information, she would do what she was obligated to do, which was to call DCFS, or the Department of Child and Family Services in Los Angeles. This is the part of it that really pisses me off. It's the system itself. Not only the system, but the 4 specific workers, social workers, that were part of this investigation and part of this case. So the social workers involved were Stephanie Rodriguez, Patricia Clement, Kevin Baum, and Gregory Merritt. The first social worker that would make contact with Pearl was Stephanie Rodriguez. This woman would go to the home, talk to Pearl, let her know of the accusations that were being made, and then Pearl would just tell her, "Oh, my son likes to lie. That's not true. I love him." And they would just leave it at that. This woman did not even try to look at Gabriel. She did not even try to ask where he was. As it is protocol, when you're a social worker and someone makes a claim of child abuse, of child neglect, anything, you have to see the child. You don't just go off of the mom's word. And this woman did. I mean, given she was newer at this, but still, you have to have training. You have to have I believe you even need a degree to do this stuff. And this woman is just like, oh, okay, cool. I'll go ahead and write it off. Now, before it could just be written off, it had to go through some sort of scoring system. I was reading an article about it, and it gets put into you have to answer, the social worker has to answer the questions, and it gets put through kind of like a computer-based program, and that program tells them how likely it is that that child is in a dangerous situation. And Gabriel's were high, but yet he was never taken away. And it pisses me off because there are children out there who are not in dangerous situations, and yet they are still being taken away from their families. It doesn't make sense. But essentially, Jennifer, Gabriel's teacher, she would still continue to talk with Gabriel, and he would continue to tell her about what was going on at home, and she would continue to make phone calls. And in fact, Stephanie was her point of contact that she had to talk to every time that there was claims that were made. She would go to Stephanie, and she would call, and she would call, and she would call, and yes, they would go to the home, but nothing was ever being done. And it got to the point where Gabriel was showing up to school with bruises. There was literal bruises on this child. And Jennifer got so concerned that she took it up to her principal and was like, is there anything else that I can do to help this kid? And her principal was just like, we just report. We don't do anything else but report it. And so when Gabriel would be at home and these social workers would come, Pearl would make him hide in that cubby box, and they called it the cubby. And anytime that Gabriel had any type of bruising, or the social workers would ask his brother and sister if Gabriel had anything wrong with him, they would just say, oh, we play a lot or we roughhouse a lot, and that's what's making these bruises on him. Now, eventually, after everything happened, the social workers involved, they were arrested, but we are gonna be getting into that later. But they were arrested. Each of them was charged with 1 count of child abuse and 1 count of falsifying public records, which under the law in California is a felony. So moving on to the day of May 22nd of 2013, Pearl would call 911 around 11 p.m. at night to report that Gabriel wasn't breathing. And this would be after a punishment or a beating, most likely. And it was for not picking up his toys. He's a little boy, So she, of course, would also tell Ezekiel and Virginia that if anyone asked, they were playing, they were roughhousing, and that's it. Once paramedics arrived on scene, they would find that Gabriel had his ribs broken, his skull was cracked, and there was literal BB pellets in this boy's body, stuck in his body. And of course, being covered in bruises. So at this point, that is when paramedics and firefighters requested for police to come on scene. And when police arrived, as soon as they arrived, Isario would tell them that Gabriel was gay. Literally, just they pull up and he's like, oh, he's gay. Okay, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Gabriel would be taken to the hospital, and he would need to be put on life support since he was basically declared brain dead. Gabriel Fernandez would pass away 2 days later on May 24th of 2013. And when Gabriel's autopsy was completed, It took the coroners 2 whole days to complete his autopsy because of how bad his body was. There was a lot that went on with this boy, and to be honest, I can't go into a lot of the details of it specifically because I couldn't stomach reading half the stuff. I literally had to take lots of breaks when I was reading this because I just couldn't do it. So everything that I'm telling you is what I was able to stomach and I was able to read before I had to take a break and go do something else because I was getting so angry doing this. But I want to go back to Gabriel's dad, Arnold. And for Arnold, when he found out what had happened to Gabriel, he was in jail. He was actually in Riverside State Jail. He was told by the jailhouse chaplain that his son was on life support and that they would be pulling the plug on him the very next day. Was just hurt because he didn't know about anything that was going on with Pearl hurting him. He didn't know anything. And he just felt like he had let him down. He felt like he should have been there for him. But because of his circumstances, he couldn't be. So Pearl Fernandez and Isadio Aguirre would be arrested on May 23rd of 2013. And Pearl would be charged with child abuse and child endangerment, and Isadio would be charged with attempted murder. And they were both arraigned, and Pearl's bail, hers would be set at $100,000, while Isadio's was set at $1 million. As for Gabriel's brother and sister, they were taken into the custody of DCFS, and Pearl and Isadio's charges after Gabriel had passed were upgraded. And they were upgraded to capital murder. And so at this point, the death penalty was put on the table. So fast forwarding to February of 2018, Pearl Fernandez actually ended up taking a plea deal and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder with no possibility of parole. The only reason that she took the plea deal was to avoid the death penalty. And the only reason that she was given a plea deal, even though in my opinion she shouldn't have been given a plea deal to begin with, was because that they had found that she was of a low IQ, which in my opinion is no excuse, but it is what it is. Isadio would actually plead not guilty and he would go to trial. And during his trial, Gabriel's brother and sister, Gabriel's father, his teacher, and even his grandfather would all testify. And the brother and sister, they would testify about how Gabriel was treated while he was living with them and how they didn't know why Pearl and Isadio only abused Gabriel, that they never abused Ezekiel, they never abused Virginia. Gabriel's father, he would testify and he would say that he felt guilty for what had happened to his son, that he felt bad that he wasn't there to protect him, and just spoke about how he was such a happy little boy and just always smiling and just a little angel.
Arnold Contreras testifies that the death of his son changed his life and the lives of Gabriel's siblings.
The family will never be the same. Everybody was affected by it.
Contreras says he is racked with guilt. He was serving time, unable to watch over his son.
Felt helpless, guilty. I should have been there.
Had he been able, he would have stopped Gabriel's mother, Pearl Fernandez, and her boyfriend, Isadio Aguirre, from taking Gabriel from the grandparents who adored him.
Pearl never showed any type of love towards Gabriel.
Contreras has been in court to see the pictures of Gabriel at the time of his death, too awful to put on TV.
His teacher would testify about what she had heard Gabriel say to her, and also, I guess, how she assigned numbers in her classroom, and that after Gabriel, his number was retired and she never used it in class for another student ever again. That's going to forever be Gabriel's number. And his grandfather, of course, would testify about how he was when he was a baby, and that of just what he witnessed once Pearl decided to come back into his life. And I believe his uncles testified as well. So finally, on June 13th of 2018, Isario Aguirre was found guilty of capital murder, and he was sentenced to death.
And this almost demands that comment be made about this case. It goes without saying that the conduct was horrendous, inhumane, and nothing short of evil. The repeated beatings, burning, starving, binding, shooting Gabriel with BBs that were embedded in different parts of his body, knocking his teeth out with a bat, locking him in a dark cabinet while he's bound, and starving this poor child. It is unimaginable the pain that this child probably endured. And from what I heard, Gabriel was a kind, loving individual who just wanted to be loved. And so, you want to say that the conduct was animalistic, but that would be wrong, because even animals know how to take care of their young, some to an extent that they will sacrifice their own lives in caring for their young. I remember saying years ago a report on the news that and this at least sent the point home to me about animals, and there was this cat who had given birth to a litter of cats, and the house wherein the kittens were in was on fire. And that's what I think it made the news, because the fire department was trying to put the fire out, but each time the mother went in to retrieve a kitten, and she would emerge from the house by the scruff, holding the kitten by the scruff, and would manage one by one to bring him or her to safety. And the last time, the house was lost, and the fire department tried to keep this cat from going into the house, but it managed to elude them, went into the house, and they thought, well, she's lost. And I never forgot thinking she made it out of the house. She had the cat by the scruff, except that she was singed and burning her face. But the thing that really struck me was the cat was not blind. The intensity of the heat burned her eyes, but she never let go of that kitten. And so when you want to say, first instinct is to say, you know what, this is animalistic. No, it's beyond animalistic, because animals know how to take care of their young. I can only wish, I really do, that you both, in the middle of the night, you wake up and you think of the injuries that you subjected this poor young man, this poor 7-year-old, and that it tortures you. I rarely say that. It'll be a different type of torture, because you won't be in pain, physical pain. But I'm not sure that you're capable of doing that. But that's my wish. I'm going to move to the issue of sentencing with respect to Cynthia Fernandez. Thank you. On February 15, 2018, the defendant, Pearl Cynthia Fernandez, entered a plea to murder in the first degree and further admitted the special circumstance of intentional murder by torture, pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, subsection A18. The defendant having waived all appellate and habeas rights as part of the plea agreement. The court ultimately finding that the defendant's plea and waiver of all of her constitutional and statutory rights were made knowingly, willingly, voluntarily, and intelligently, and further that she understood all of the consequences of her plea. Moreover, the record reflects that the defendant confirmed that she was intellectually capable of entering and understanding her plea agreement. Accordingly, it is the judgment and sentence of this court that the defendant shall be sentenced to a term of life in prison without the possibility of parole for the underlying murder charge, coupled with the special torture special circumstance allegation under Penal Code Section 190.2, subsection A18. With respect to Mr. Isario Aguirre, It is a judgment and sentence of this court that for the crime of murder in the first degree committed under the special circumstance that the murder was intentional and involved the infliction of torture, defendant Esadio Aguirre shall be put to death within the walls of the California State Prison at San Quentin.
So the aftermath of this case is significant because of the fact that the social workers that I mentioned earlier, Stephanie Rodriguez, Patricia Clement, Kevin Bond, and Gregory Merritt, though they were arrested and charged, eventually those charges were dismissed. The ruling was that the workers did not have a legal responsibility to care for the child the way a parent would. These social workers also felt like they did nothing wrong, that they did everything that they could under their circumstances, though those circumstances were their caseloads. It's no surprise that DCFS has an overwhelming caseload, especially in a big city like Los Angeles. But guess what? When you have more caseloads, you have demand for employees. And so that people don't get overwhelmed and have mistakes happen, you hire more people. You train more people to do that job. You don't just give another person a big giant stack of cases, because then you have situations like this that happen. And as far as training, because that social worker, Stephanie, was trained, you make sure that they're trained well, that they understand the job that they're going into, especially when they have the power to take a child from their family. You want to make sure that that employee knows exactly the circumstances in which you would take a child from a family. And you also make sure that that employee knows to physically see the kid before they decide to just close out a case. Being overwhelmed is not an excuse to falsify records to show that you were doing your job when clearly you weren't. Now, this isn't just in LA, this is across this country. And I believe that in this case, though the judge said a social worker isn't as responsible for a child as a parent is, the social worker is responsible for the records that they keep. So at the minimum, at the very, very minimum, these people should have been charged with falsifying records. Though I believe they were all fired, still, what that teaches, what that's bringing out to people is just make sure that you don't get caught. What that tells the next person is you can get away with it as long as you keep your records better than the last person did. So that way you don't get caught. Moving on to Gabriel's family. His uncles, and who in my opinion were his real parents, Michael Caranza and David Martinez. Michael Caranza would unfortunately pass away in 2014. I believe it was like about 16 to 18 months after Gabriel passed away. And his partner David would unfortunately be deported to San Salvador in El Salvador. And sadly, he would also pass away in July of 2020 due to COVID-19. I like to think that they're now reunited with Gabriel and they have their son back and they're just having a beautiful life together in heaven. Gabriel's brother and sister, Ezekiel and Virginia Fernandez, they moved out of state and they're just trying to move past this and get on with their lives. As for Arnold Contreras, Gabriel's father. I've been unable to truly confirm whether he's currently out of jail or in jail, but I did find that he is in Tacoma, California, if he's out of jail, and is a tattoo artist. Now, in 2019, he was serving time in Calipatria State Jail. And his offense, it was like a nonviolent offense. And I believe it was like possession, I want to say, but it was a nonviolent offense. And he has since been eligible for parole. So if he is out of jail, most likely he is in Pacoima, California, working as like a tattoo artist. If he's in jail, he's in jail at Calipatria, but he's eligible for parole. Gabriel's grandparents, Robert and Sandra, they actually filed a lawsuit. I'm assuming it would have been like a wrongful death lawsuit against all of the people who were involved and who could have prevented Gabriel's death. Now, there's no actual reports of this ever actually going to trial, so I'm assuming that they did go ahead and settle out of court. And from what I've found, if they did in fact settle out of court, it was settled for $2.8 million. And that was also split between the family as well as Gabriel's father. Now, for the two scumbags of the earth, Isario Aguirre is currently serving his sentence at San Quentin State Prison. And as of 2019, California Governor Gavin Newsom actually signed a moratorium on the death penalty. So at this point, California has frozen any death penalties and they are not moving forward with executions. So it's pretty much like he's just living his sentence as life without parole until that moratorium is lifted. And then they would, of course, continue with his death penalty at some point. And I really hope that they do lift it at one point so that this guy can just be rid from this earth and the California taxpayers don't have to worry about housing this man. As for the egg donor herself, Pearl Fernandez, she is currently serving her sentence in Chowchilla State Women's Prison. And I can gladly say, though, that this woman was assaulted, attacked, beat up while she's in prison. This came out after one of her inmates got out and made like a YouTube video. I'll try to see if I can find a clip so I can insert it for you so that you can see.
What was her stilo, man?
You know what, when she went in there, like I'm saying, for her charges and her charges were, she never showed any remorse. You know, she never looked, she was like a proud criminal. She walked with her head high. Blew her coverage a little is that she started stealing. She started stealing from her cellies.
Wow.
Was in the day room, everybody's in the day room, and then what happened? So then it was like around the same time. So then she gets questioned about her paperwork because what it is there, right? And in prison on AR, you're watching an hour of TV. You're not, you don't get to watch Netflix. Honestly, I didn't even know about the case, But what happened is people from her county started saying that's her, she killed her baby, she blah, blah, blah. So at the same time at the day room, people started pointing her out. So then when the homegirl asked her for her paperwork, she goes, I'm here on child endangerment charges, but my boyfriend did it. And then the homegirl's like, all right, well, I need your paperwork. You're already stealing, you're already doing too much, and I'm not gonna sleep with this shit,
So hold on.
CO pops the doors to give the ducats. That's when the CO goes, oh, you sleep pretty good for having killed your baby. So then that right there was like a big thing. That right there, everybody everybody shook like fucking pit bulls, dog. I'm gonna keep it 100.
Yeah.
Everybody shook like fucking pit bulls. It didn't matter if you're black, white, whatever the fuck. It's like
Off
the
top.
CO motherfucking confirming your motherfucking charges. You feel me?
Yeah.
So at this point, everybody's ready just to get in on it. So we're going to the chow hall. So at this point, everybody's like, fuck, how are we gonna do this? Well, work, fuck, as soon as we get the fucking chance,
Yeah, off top.
And this is like the attack, the homegirl's behind her, Pearl's, going to chow. She's getting her tray. Bitch had part of the tray for a second, got fucking drop kicked, and fucking boom, bitch. It was a wrap after that,
It was all
And
on
at
her?
that point, yeah, they fucking dog fucking walk the bitch,
Yeah, yeah.
And at this point, everybody at the chow hall, they have hot water, coffee for everybody. So
Yeah.
everybody that had a cup that was everybody, and the CEO just turned away. I feel at that moment she fucking life just humbled her right there. Like she realized she wasn't gonna hide. She wasn't gonna be able to fucking run, and nobody was gonna do shit.
Pretty much they confirmed it after a correctional officer confirmed it for them that it was Pearl Fernandez, because she wasn't doing right when she was in prison. Because when you're in prison, you have to adjust, I guess, to a certain lifestyle, and she just wasn't doing that. So they already wanted to hurt her, and then when they found out who she was and what she did, they pretty much made sure that happened. And the way it happened was that a correctional officer actually made a comment to Pearl and said, "You sleep pretty well for someone who killed their baby." It came out, and they found out, and I guess it happened when they were like doing lunch or something, and they just jumped her, and I loved hearing every minute of that. It also recently came out, and by recently I mean like within the last month in April, that Pearl is actually trying to appeal her sentencing to get out of prison, citing that she actually was not the one to murder Gabriel, so she should be let out. And this is all being entertained due to a change in the state law. And the latest on this is that her next trial date is set for June 1st. And best believe I'm going to be keeping an eye out on this, and I will keep you updated as new things come out. But yeah, June 1st looks like it's going to be her next trial date. So that's the story of Gabriel Fernandez. May he rest in peace, and may his soul be at peace. But I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.
Mama, I'm a criminal. Mama, I'm a criminal.